welcome to the Business of Story. I'm your host, Park Howell, who incidentally has two amazing short online courses just for you to ignite your brand sales, marketing, and leadership storytelling. But they won't work if you don't take them. So check out either the ABTs of Selling and or the ABTs of Branding at businessofstory.thinkific.com. Or you can use the quick link bit.ly/ABT courses. That's bit.ly/ABT courses. And if you'd like me to light a fire under your colleagues to help them become more confident and persuasive storytellers, reach out to me at park@businessofstory.com, and I'll show you how either my in-person or virtual masterclass or mastery course will revolutionize how your team communicates to ignite your revenue growth. How to ignite your growth through storytelling is exactly what we're exploring on today's show with the Pink Billionaire, JB Owen, CEO of Ignite, who leads the industry in empowerment publishing with 12 internationally best-selling anthologies in just over 12 months. What's her secret to storytelling?
I think the ability to tell a great story is the willingness to step into the emotion of it. I think when you really, really saturate yourself with what is the experience and what was I meant to learn from it and how do I feel about it? Like I feel every one of those stories. I feel those emotions by retelling them. And when you can be vulnerable and authentic enough to tell your story really from a place of emotional acceptance, emotional well-being, emotional care, self-care, that makes the story interesting because you're in the emotion of it. You love the emotion of it.
As you'll hear, JB combines a unique business style of fierce determination with femininity and fun, which has catapulted her to success in building worldwide brands, manufacturing award-winning products, publishing international best-selling books, and creating multiple transformational platforms in the areas of health, wellness, personal growth, and eco-conscious improvements. But it hasn't come easy for JB, as she shares one of her Ignite moments that involved her dad saying she'd have to put a bag over her head if they were going to go out in public together. That would make a lesser person crumble into oblivion, I would think. But it's these very moments that can make us the victim, the villain, or the victor in our lives, and are typically the impetus for creating much greater things as we move forward. JB loves mentoring on a diverse array of topics around entrepreneurship, creativity, personal transformation, self-improvement, healthy lifestyles, parenting, and conscious leadership. That's a lot, as well as sharing her incredible personal journey from small-town girl to working in major motion pictures and growing a global seven-figure business success followed by its bankruptcy. You'll learn how to find your Ignite moments to fire up your brand storytelling, the concept behind a goo, that's right, a goo, and how to step into the emotion of your story. By the way, JB is often called the Pink Billionaire not because she's got $1 billion in the bank, but it's due to her billionaire in the making attitude, which you are just about ready to be exposed to help ignite your sales. Please welcome to the Business of Story, JB Owen. JB, welcome to the show.
So delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I've got to ask, what does JB stand for?
Oh my gosh, everybody asked me. I'm so blessed. It was just, that's all there is. That's all my parents gave me. My mom was in the hospital. My dad was away when I was born, and they just put J and B on the birth certificate thinking they'd name me something. And when my dad traveled back and met me, he was like, JB, that's cool. Let's just go with that.
So it was a temporary name for you. And he got back and said, no, actually, that's pretty cool. We're going to keep it.
Exactly.
Wow. And where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Canada in a small town, and I have to admit, having the name JB was not easy, especially as a girl. You know, I was born in the 70s, so it wasn't common at all for initials. It was very uncommon. And I have to be honest, I struggled with it in school and all throughout my business career. I started my first job at 15, and that my boss said, I don't like the name JB. You have to pick something else. So I picked a name off of a television show. I'd seen a movie about a woman named Jillian Bromley, so I decided to call myself Jillian, and my boss put my paperwork into the taxes as Jillian, and for about 10 years, I would get papers from the government and my T4s and my all my income tax, and it would say Jillian, and it was interesting because Jillian didn't really exist. JB existed, but I could go to the bank and cash a check by Jillian either easier than I could by JB. It was so problematic when I was a kid.
That is nuts. And why did your boss at the age of 15 think JB name was not appropriate?
Yeah, she said it sounds unprofessional, it doesn't make sense, it's not very ladylike. I mean, it was fascinating, and so for a long time, I actually played with different names, and people always would ask me, "What does JB stand for?" And sort of depending on where I was in my life, I would make up a joke. I even went to drama camp when I was 16 and called myself Jeff for something fun to do. So it allowed me to have some personas, I will admit, but I have to say that I love the name JB. I have traveled to Asia very frequently to do business, and it's always Mr. JB because they don't expect a woman to show up and do business in Asia. I've been picked up by, people at the airport, shuttles and stuff, and they always think it's Mr. JB. When I pick up the phone and someone says, "Is Mr. JB there?" I say, "Oh, you have the wrong number."
Well, I know the power of what's in a name being named Park
Mhm.
Howell. A lot of times people call me Mr. Park, and then they think a Korean showing up. And it is so
Oh.
funny that one time Michelle and I went to this custom make your own donut shop that had just opened up in Phoenix, and it was kind of a silly little operation. It's no longer in business. But we went in to check it out, and I ordered my donut. She got her donut. And we waited and waited and waited until it came. And then finally, I was keeping my eye on the baker and the server, and I know that ours came up. And they come walking around a corner, and they walk it over, and they drop it in front of a Korean gentleman. And he kind of looks at
Oh.
it sort of surprised. And I laughed, and I walked up and went over to him. And I said, "I bet your last name is Park, isn't it?" And he said, "Yes. How'd you know?" I said, "Because my first name is Park, and I believe that's our order." And we all got a big laugh out of it.
Well, it is powerful, the name. I do agree with you, and I think it does set a tone, obviously, for how you like to do life. I did arrive in China to do business, and of course, my factory picked me up with a limousine. And when I got in the limousine, there was like four girls in the back of the limousine.
Oh, no.
Yes. So it's a blessing, and it's a good thing to have a good laugh about it because, you just gotta have some fun with it. So JB it is, that's what I got, that's all my parents gave me.
Well, JB, I'm so glad you're here with us today. You've got another moniker that I'm interested in exploring before we dive headlong into the show, unless we've already done that, and that is the Pink Billionaire.
Yeah, the Pink Billionaire showed up a couple of years ago as I was really stepping into the power of being a woman in business. I've had my first business. I started my first business when I was 9, and I've always been a business owner. I've loved being an entrepreneur. And what I found was for decades I was trying to be a businessman. Like I was trying to have that masculine energy around my business. I didn't have any other business models than men. And so I was showing up masculine. I was showing up with the same ideas that aspiring for what the men in business were aspiring for. And what I found, especially when I became the most successful slash most unhappiest, was that I was really trying to follow the male business model. And it wasn't until I really stepped into being fierce and fabulously feminine and really loving my femininity that I realized like that's my business strength and that's where I do great business. And so what I wanted to do was be a role model for other women to know that they could be fierce and fabulous and feminine at the same time. And of course, so that's where the pink came from. But billionaire then turned into, we're all aspiring to be a billionaire. And what I realize is that if you want to be a billionaire, there's a certain level of consciousness that you need to have. It's not about the dollars, it's about the impact. If you really reach billionaire status, you're thinking about longevity, you're thinking about generational, you're thinking about multicultural, you're thinking about nation, multi-nation, global. Like there's such a different level of consciousness that comes with billionaire than just the number of dollars or yen or currency in your bank account. And so Pink Billionaire for me really became this feminine ability to create a billion person impact and to think about what we're doing on a global scale and what we're doing generationally and creating legacy. And so that's why the Pink Billionaire showed up. And I have to say, it makes me work harder. It really, really does. When COVID hit, a lot of people said, like, yo, you shouldn't be called a pink billionaire because people are struggling and what are people going to think? And, it's kind of extravagant. And so I kind of sheltered it for a little bit. But what I found is like every day when I go to work and I think that I feel like the pink billionaire, I work harder, I do more, I show up better, I elevate, I have impeccable integrity. And so I, of course, go by the Pink Billionaire. I share the Pink Billionaire with people, and I just want every woman to know that you can be fabulous, fierce, and feminine and make a billion person impact, and I'm happy to be a role model for that for all the women who need it.
And so where does this mindset come from? When I was reading through your, biography, and you talk about all the work you do for self-improvement, healthy lifestyles, parenting, and so forth. And you have this incredible personal journey that I'd like to hear, from being the small town girl to working in major motion pictures. Can you take us on that
Mhm.
quick little tour? Because I'm fascinated by Hollywood, major motion pictures, and I'd love to hear what you did there too.
Well, I always have loved fashion. I've loved creativity. I've loved the theater. I love designing. I never excelled academically. I loved the arts. And growing up in a small town really was ostracized for this big personality and this big desire to be in the movies and to be on stage and to be in fashion. And 11 days after I finished high school, I moved to the big city of Vancouver in Canada to get involved in fashion, study fashion design, textile science, became just immersed in fashion, started a couple of different fashion companies, started a jewelry company, and the next best step was to get into the movie business. And as we all know, Vancouver is Hollywood North. Many major motion pictures are being filmed there and television. And so I applied to be in the union, which was kind of neat because I applied to be in the union. It was about a 2-year waiting list. So in the meantime, I went and worked on a cruise ship as a social hostess.
Hmm.
And when I came back, I had been approved. I had waited my turn in line, and finally my name was up at the front. And I took my union test and got into the film business and worked in the costume and wardrobe department for almost 15 years. And really, at the same time, always had my own business. But when you work in the film union, you're sort of your own entrepreneur because you're running your own business, but you are, obviously working to create this beautiful film. And so that's really been my journey into film and television and doing what I love, which is creating costumes and working with really beautiful, amazing people.
Well, yeah, it sounded like it was the perfect intersection of your interests, between being flamboyant and out there, but then working with the costumes and the fashion and so forth. It must have just been a great time in your life.
Yeah, you have to be a little odd to work in film because the thing is it's never the same day twice. You never wake up at the same day, you never go to work at the same day, you never come home at the same day, you never work the same hours, you never eat lunch at the same time. So you have to have that kind of personality that is excited by the newness, and every day is a new day. And of course you got to love movie magic because you're always making movie magic. You're blowing things up, you're smashing cars, people are drowning, people are, turning into munchkins. Like there's always something happening on a film set. But the diversity is one thing. You become an incredible family, but at the same time, you have to be really adaptable. You have to be at any given moment willing to shift, change, and fix something that happens. I mean, in the caution department, we would, blow people up, or, big gun wounds, or people would fall off of bridges. Like there was always something going on, and the costumes obviously would be affected. When I did the film with Arnold Schwarzenegger, we had 52 of the exact same costume at every different stage of him being beat up and blown up and ran over and all those sorts of things. So the same costume at 52 different stages throughout the movie to just, obviously carry on the story because you never film in order of what's happening.
What movie was that?
The Sixth Sense, I believe, was the name of the movie, taking me back a few decades.
The Sixth Sense, isn't that where the kid says, "I see
No,
dead
you're
people"?
right. You're right. It's not the Sixth Sense. It's the Sixth something. I can't remember. Maybe I have to Google it right now while we're
Oh,
talking.
well, we're taking a look at it.
Let me just see. I can't remember the name, but isn't that terrible? It was so long
No,
ago.
it's not. It's just the way things happens, especially in busy, vibrant lives like yours. It's hard to keep it all straight. You said after that that you had built a seven-figure global business, but it ended up going into bankruptcy?
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I started my business out of my basement like many people do. I'd been in the film industry for 15 years and then I decided that I wanted to have children and so I got pregnant and when my son was 5 months old, I was like, "Wow, boys really get ripped off when it comes to clothing." And so I started making boys clothes. I lived on the West Coast, so rain gear was a big thing and there was nothing but these plastic sort of fire engine red raincoats for kids. In the summertime, it was super hot and I didn't believe in sunscreen, and I didn't think that was good to put all those chemicals on my new baby. So I started doing some research and making clothes that were UV protected and they were wick away and functional. Lululemon had just become the craze in Vancouver. All the moms were wearing Lululemon to the gymboree and gymnastics, and all the kids were wearing pajamas and chinos from the Gap. And so I immediately, like all good entrepreneurs, are like, problem here. How can we solve this problem? And so I immediately went to Asia and started making kids' clothes out of wick away fabrics and spent the next 4 years just building an empire. I had my second child, a daughter, at 2 weeks old. She was in a photo shoot for the clothing company. We were selling around the globe. We had multiple distributors, and I was entrepreneuring myself, right out of a marriage. I was unwell. I was working way too much. I became, sick, having panic attacks. It just was the worst time of my life. And so it's interesting how wealth and success can become a bit insidious because people were patting me on the head and so happy that I was making so much money and thinking that I was doing so well when in truth I was really unhappy. I was lonely, I was overworked, I was underappreciated, I was traveling to China 5 times a year. And I think a lot of women who balance life, marriage, parenting, and trying to build a business and trying to figure out where they fit into, the growth of their business struggle with trying to be perfect at it all. And I really fell into that trap. And I ended up, ending my marriage. And it's an interesting story because I came home from China after being gone for 21 days. It was 8 days before Christmas. I came in the house and no one had picked me up at the airport, so I took a taxi. And when I walked into the door, I heard the kids in the laughing with the nanny, and I became really jealous. And interestingly enough, I snuck upstairs without seeing them and just went into the guest room and went to bed, convincing myself that, oh, mommy's been on a 13-hour flight. I'll just see the kids in the morning. And fascinatingly enough, and thank you God, my daughter woke up in the middle of the night and she started calling the nanny's name. And instantly I knew, like, what am I doing? Like, why am I working so hard doing a children's clothing company when my kids don't even know me? They don't even spend time with me. And my 3-year-old is calling the nanny instead of me. And I woke up the next morning and I knew I had to change everything, like not just one thing, every single thing in my life had to change. And that was the day I moved my husband out. I changed everything in my life. I changed my business. And at the same time, I was just emotionally struggling so much that I couldn't keep the business going. And so I ended up walking away. I ended up leaving a warehouse full of $700,000 worth of stock. I ended up telling all my suppliers that I was leaving and I couldn't come to sell the business. I just walked away, and it ended up obviously going into bankruptcy. And I wish, if in hindsight today, looking back, I wish that I would have surrounded myself with better mentors and better support system, and people could have pulled me forward in my business instead of feeling like I had to do it all on my own. But of course, everything happens for a reason, and that business dissolved because amongst the success of that business, what I had done was I had brought in a lot of male directors and people who were starting to take over the business on a management level, and it pulled me away from what my vision of the company was. And as those men, more and more men, my entire, head of leadership uh, group was all men. I was the only woman in my business and it started to lose the heart of my business, and I really found out that I wasn't creating my business for me anymore, and so I learned a lot. I learned a lot in losing that company. It took me years to say the name of it without choking up, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me in retrospect because it made me realize, like, how important it is to be your own business owner, to put the heart and soul into your business. I only put the triple win in my business now, And I'm really, really clear on how important it is for me to keep the vision of the business and, be a leader in my business instead of letting my business go. And then having that work life balance that all women need when they've got family and kids and community and all of that. Long winded answer for you.
No, it was great, but you had me too throughout the whole thing because I was curious. What is the name of the business?
Well, the name of the business was Agoo, which is the very first word my son said to me when he was 5 months old. I said, "I love you," and he said, "Agoo," back to me, and I was like, "Oh my god, it speaks, it talks, it can communicate, it loves me." And so we called it an Agoo, and I was so excited because when he said that to me, it just woke up something in me. It lit up that beautiful parent-child connection. And I thought a lot that, kids have an Agoo moment every day of their lives. Agoo first time they eat ice cream, Agoo first time they see fireworks, Agoo first time they pet a cat. And as we become adults, we lose those Agoo moments. Something great will happen to us. We'll be like, "Yeah, whatever," and they'll just gloss over it. And so Agoo was all about obviously a kids clothing company, but was also about this epiphany, this serendipity, this like exuberance that children have that we learn when we that we lose when we get older. And so even to this day, something will happen to us or in our family, and it's really spectacular. And we'll all laugh and be like, a goo moment, a goo moment, because you really have to saturate yourself in those moments that happen that are beautiful and precious and we don't celebrate enough. And so that's what a goo is all about.
And is that Agoo, Agoo?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can believe the Howell family lore, my dad, who has since passed away when he was 91, so lived a nice long life. And we grew up in Seattle, so we're practically Canadian. And his very first words, he was a huge, huge ice cream fan. And if you believe Grandma Mabel, his very first words were, I hum. And she says for ice cream. So your son is a goo for, hey, I love
Yeah.
you, and aha moment. His was I hum for I love ice cream, I guess. But that
Fabulous,
leads
fabulous.
us to these Ignite moments in your publishing company called Ignite. And the fact that you have published 12 memoirs in the last 12 months, all becoming bestsellers. So, can you fast forward to what you are doing today? And we're probably going to tie together your backstory and how that all informs what you're doing today around the world with your very ambitious, hairy, audacious goal of igniting possibilities in 7 billion lives.
Yeah, well, it is a big, hairy, audacious goal. But the thing is, especially with COVID, I mean, COVID has become this common denominator amongst us all, which is sad because it shouldn't be. What really, for me, has been stories, telling our authentic, amazing, transformational story. And I call it an ignite moment. Every single person on the planet has had an ignite moment, if not multiple. When my daughter called out the nanny's name, ignite moment. When I walked away from my company, ignite moment. Now, sometimes our ignite moments can be really hard and difficult. It's like crawling over broken glass. But there are other times when that ignite moment absolutely awakens us and transforms us and changes us and pushes us in a new direction. And I felt like we all have ignite moments. And if we can share those and share what we had learned from them and share how we have grown from them, now we can help people. Now we can inspire people. Now we can show people that I did it. I got through it. You can get through it. If he can do it, she can do it. And so ignite moments have become so profound for me because it's not about the color of your skin or how much money you have in your pocket or what country you live in. It's about perseverance. It's about tenacity. It's about the hero's journey. And we all have a choice in life when something happens to us. We can become a villain or a victim, or we can become a hero. And the hero journey sometimes takes years and decades, but there comes a point when you look back at your ignite moment and you realize, like, that was the best thing that happened to me. I struggled saying the word "agoo" for a long time because I knew I'd lost a company. I mean, we were on the verge of going into Costco's, we were going into Sport Check. I mean, we were on the cusp, and I let it all slip between my fingers. And so that agoo moment, that ignite moment, that moment where I needed to look back and see, like, that was a pivotal moment for me to make a new decision because today my company, Ignite, which is all about igniting moments, is built on a foundation of who I really, really am wanting to be as a business owner, not just as a parent, but as a business owner that can make an impact on the planet because our businesses come together for the ability to impact others. And so Ignite is all about those Ignite moments. How do we impact others? How do we impact humanity? How do we touch lives? How do we make us feel connected? How do we let stories be the common denominator between all of us and really let us connect with each other? When we connect with each other, we build better businesses, we make better decisions, and we create a collaboration that uplifts others.
JB, do you feel like you are a natural, even gifted storyteller where because you're very good at sharing your story here? And I ask that because I get pushback so often in my trainings, and I'm sure I've got listeners that might be thinking the same thing of that's all well and good for JB, but she's obviously very natural at this. How can I possibly find my Ignite moments and share my stories? Or should I even bother? Because, and you've probably heard this too, I don't have a story to tell, or nobody wants to hear my stupid, boring story.
Well, it's fascinating. My husband now, he says that all the time. I don't have a story. Nobody wants to hear my story. And so it's been really great to live with somebody to help realize like their perspective on I don't have a story or who's going to want to hear my story. My story isn't interesting. I think the ability to tell a great story is the willingness to step into the emotion of it. I think when you really, really saturate yourself with what is the experience and what was I meant to learn from it and how do I feel about it? Like I feel every one of those stories. I feel those emotions by retelling them. And when you can be vulnerable and authentic enough to tell your story really from a place of emotional acceptance, emotional well-being, emotional care, self-care, that makes the story interesting because you're in the emotion of it. You love the emotion of it. I recently did a book with Les Brown, and we talk about this so much. When Les Brown speaks, he tells you the story as if he's living it again, and you feel it. You're there with him. And so I feel that emotions are the things that make our stories so powerful. Now, when people feel they have a dull emotion or a dull story or a not interesting story, I feel it's like because they haven't really stepped into the emotion of it. You can have an emotion from the smallest thing. I was sitting on a park bench watching two 85-year-old couples walk holding hand in hand. That provoked such an emotion for me. That was an Ignite moment. I was like, I want to be like that when I'm 85. I want someone to look at me and hold my wrinkly hand with so much love and passion when I'm 85. So an Ignite moment doesn't have to be big and huge and galactic. It has to be rooted in emotion. It has to be rooted in what makes us human and all the human emotions. We're required to feel each and every one of them. When you feel it and you tell your story and you share it and you tell your story, that's what makes people want to do business with you. That's what makes people lean in and want to know more and want to find out more because they see you showing up authentically vulnerable and willing to feel. And if you're willing to feel something, well, you're going to probably do better business with me. You're probably going to care about our interactions. You're probably going to have, compassion for me as a customer. And so, willingness to feel your story, I think, is so powerful for business. It's so powerful for relationships. It's really where we have to be on a human scale in government and in politics. And I could go on, but
Yeah.
I'm so passionate about it and I think you hear and you feel that passion in me. And therefore, there's that trust and that connection and that closeness that comes from it.
How do you coach people to find their stories and that feeling and give them enough courage to be able to share that story with the feeling? Or maybe you've got an author that's coming into Ignite and they really want to write a book. Maybe it's their very first book and they give you that first manuscript and it's kind of meh, they're too general. They're tap dancing around what was really going on in their life and what was really going on in their emotion at that time. What do you do to help people pull that out?
Well, we're so blessed. We've had 700 authors go through our system already. And, I will say every one of them is a little bit nervous, a little bit apprehensive, a little bit trepidatious. And what we do is we really, obviously, we hold a safe space for you. We make it really safe and comfortable. But the truth is, I think one of the main things about human beings is we want to share and we want to be seen and we want to be heard and we want to belong. And so when you come to be in an Ignite project, you really are seen and you really are heard. You really do become a part of our community. And that safe container of what we create at Ignite really allows people to share. So a lot of times, even think back to when you were in grade 3 and you got your, paper back from your teacher and she had it all full of, red X's. And that was my experience, all kinds of red marks on my paper. There was this real disconnect to what you wrote because there was this real emotion of shame or I didn't do good enough or something like that. So what we do is we really help people realize that you're telling a story not for you, you're telling a story for someone else. We really guide you to realize that somebody listening right today, Park, needs to hear my story. They need to hear what I said. Something I said is going to change their life or impact them or just give them that 1 degree movement in a new direction. And so when you tell your story, you're actually really there to do it for the person, for the reader, for the person who needs to hear your story. And I say all the time, if you have a desire to write a story, if you know that there's a story in you and you just need to work out the schematics of how to make it interesting or good for the reader, the real essence of the story is that somebody needs to hear it. Because there is no desire without a need. It's just a law of physics. A desire comes from a need. And so somebody needs to hear your story. And when you can move from my story's not about me anymore. It's about who needs to read it, who needs to hear it, who it can help. I think that's what starts to transpose the writer out of the fear and the worry about their story being what it needs to be for them and what it can be for the reader.
Do you teach story structure or do you have a framework or format that you ask your writers to write in?
Yeah, we have a winning Ignite recipe. We have a power quote, an intention. People share their Ignite moment. And then we have action steps at the end because I feel like you can't do anything without taking action. And so every story includes action in it because I want people to be able to close the book and take action. And so we give you the story, we give you the intention, we give you a power quote that you can, really adhere to. And then this ability to take action because when, writing is a muscle, it's you got to get into the habit of writing. Telling your story is also muscle. You got to work your mouth and work your magic and dive into your emotions to tell a good story. And so it takes practice. It takes a little bit of work. And so we walk you through those steps. We show you the recipe. We do it with you. We do masterminds with you. We do coaching, training, and speaking with you. So we just help you get comfortable because the truth is, not all of us. I mean, think of how many times you told your story. You're probably really good at it. I'm probably really good at it. But a lot of other people have never told their story. We've had multiple authors who have published stories of being assaulted, of being molested, of being bankrupt, of being cheated on, of having suicidal thoughts. They've never told that story. And that story stuck inside of them, that feeling, those emotions all bottled up, the fear and the shame of revealing that to anyone is so debilitating. And I will tell you, when people share their Ignite moment, they feel liberated, they feel transformed, they feel released, they feel empowered because they're letting go of all the stuff that they've never ever admitted to or never told before. And that is powerful.
All right, JB. So imagine a listener right now, and he or she is on their 5 mile jog, and they are listening to us in their earbuds. And they're thinking, boy, this is fascinating. I wonder if I've got Ignite moments or what are my Ignite moments and how would I tell that story? All right, the stage is yours. They're there running right now. What can you tell them? What is the very next thing that they should do to find that Ignite moment and start crafting that story around it?
Well, I always tell people to carve away time just for you. So the next day when you wake up, don't touch your phone, don't touch your computer, don't do anything. Go and write out your story. If it's by hand in your journal, if it's on your computer, don't let anything distract you and just immerse yourself into sharing your story. Now be willing to dive into the emotions. And many of our authors cry and have, the emotional tears. And that's good because if you're feeling a little bit of tightness in the throat or a little bit of pain in the chest, it's because you're touching the emotions. So be willing to breathe through those emotions and put them on the page. Let the reader come along the journey with you. Take them hand in hand and walk them through the process that you've been through. Share with them the steps before, the steps during, the steps after. put it down on paper. And if you have to each and every morning for the next week, wake up and just do 20 minutes of writing, do that. Or let it all pour out. Don't hold yourself back. Write as much as you can. Let all the emotions flow through you and tap into a greater version of yourself than just the keys on the on the computer or like the words on the page. Just let it flow out of you. And then if you really, really want to share your story and you want it to be published, of course, we are always available to support you and assist you. And we welcome you to come and be a part of the Ignite process. Start telling your story at a dinner party. Start telling your story to your spouse. Start sharing your story. I actually love telling stories to my kids because there's a lot of things about me they don't know. And they sit and wonder and they listen and they're so intrigued. So practice telling your story and saying it in a way that you know it's helping somebody else. It's not for you to rant and rave or get pity or get, somebody to feel sorry for you. It's not for you to just continue to say it because you're right and it was so unjust. Tell your story in a way that you know it will uplift people. It will propel people. It will elevate people. And walk through your story as long as it needs to take to get to that step.
But that's a big ask because people, and the reason why I say that, JB, is people, I can just hear them right now because I've made this mistake too, is say, all right, well, that's all well and good, but where do I start? I mean,
Yeah.
someone could say, I'm 50 years old. I got a lot of story to tell. Where do I possibly start? And is the answer found in an ignite moment, something that happened in your life, which really starts with a scene that maybe sparked a curiosity in you, fired up a passion about something that surprised you, but has informed who you are today. You didn't know that that was going to happen way back when it happened. But is that where you go and ask people to start? Because otherwise it's like, oh my God, I have no idea where to start on that story.
Well, actually, no, I do, to be honest. I ask people to go back to when they were young and think of an ignite. We call it an ignite impact moment. So think of a time when you were young, when something happened to you that really changed and altered your thinking. So when I was 12 years old, I was sitting in the backseat of a car with my dad, and we were going to a pool party at his friend's house. And I had my hair all messy and spiky and punky. And my dad said, I wish you could put a bag on your head before we get there because I don't want anyone to see the way you look. And at 12 years old, that moment completely defined me. Like, my dad thinks I should put a bag on my head. My dad thinks something's wrong with me. My dad's embarrassed by the way I look. And that impacted me. That was an ignite moment. Now, it impacted me in such a way that I led my life for probably another 20 years thinking like my dad doesn't, is embarrassed me. I don't look good. Maybe I should put a bag on my head. Maybe I should be quiet. Maybe I shouldn't say anything. Maybe I shouldn't act a certain way. Maybe I shouldn't do this. Until an ignite transformational moment came when I just absolutely realized that that was his stuff. That was his thing. He didn't really say it to be mean and hurtful. He said it because he has his own hangups. He was born on a farm. He came from a town where he was worried about what people said. And so ignite impact moments are moments in your childhood that really define you. And then later in life, you have this awakening, this epiphany, this new idea about an ideology that you set on yourself. And what happens is you can create a new meaning around it. That's what makes it so healing and so transformative is because I can look back at that ignite moment as a kid and realize that isn't really, even though I believe that for so long, that isn't really what happened. And so to get started, I could ask you, like, anywhere in your life, think back when you were a kid, something that happened to you that really became like a rock in your world, either a good one or a bad one. I mean, many people have had amazing things when they were happen with their kid. They've met their sports hero, or they've had, there's this journey with their pet, or something has happened that was just such an epiphany for them, such a rock in their life that it really defined who they were. And then when you look later in your life and you see, like, how has that belief system changed me, or how has it defined me? People have been told they were overweight, or they'd never make it, or they weren't good enough, and they live their whole life realizing that. When you look at that ignite impact moment and then think of who you are today and how far you've come and how different you feel and what's happened to change your thinking, that's your ignite transformation moment. Now, some people reading this and on their jog might be like, I've never had my ignite transformational moment. And that's possible. And that happens to a lot of us. We have a thinking that we got when we were a kid and we're still carrying it with us. And as I love to say, your story does not define you. Instead, it refines you.
And so often those ignite moments as when we're kids have a totally wrong meaning to them, just like yours did when you said you're, 12 years old and your dad had that reaction to you. Well, you carried that story around with you for how many years, how many decades until you said, well, wait a minute, that's not me. That's about him. And
Mhm.
how often with your authors too, do you kind of unearth that in them where they come to write and in the writing, they dispel that untruth about that story they've been telling themselves for all of these years following a very impressionable ignite moment as a kid, and how, wow, actually, it's liberating. I am not that story. I'm actually more like this story, and I like this story a heck of a lot better than that old one.
You nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. You said it perfectly. And it happens every single time. Every single time. Even when authors show up and they're like, I know exactly what I'm going to write about. I know exactly what my Ignite moment is. They get into the process and then they are amazed at the unfurlowing of more of the lesson. I did a story polish just the other day with an author who was writing about a situation that she was in with an ex and she needed to forgive him. But in writing her story, she realized she actually needed to forgive herself. She needed to forgive herself for the choices that she made and her 50% of 100% of the situation. And so she had such a change in writing her story, even though she knew what her Ignite moment was. There was another layer to it. And that is the power of storytelling. That is the power of writing. That's the power of immersing yourself into an Ignite moment because I'm all for writing fiction. I'm all for writing, fantasy and thrillers and all kinds of fun stuff and self-help. But when you write your own story, when you tell your own story and you immerse yourself in the story of you, what could be more fascinating and revealing and explorative than you and your emotions and your process? It's just incredible. I really, really have to share that. Incredible.
Well, I was thinking about an ignite moment in your life when at 15, you had a boss that said, you must be much more professional at 15. Let's start right there. And we're going to change your story from JB to Julian Bromley. I mean, that
Yeah.
must have been really weird in hindsight.
Yeah, actually it is, but, I look back and I think, "Wow, that was her stuff." Like, JB she didn't like JB, and I think about her, she was very uptight, and she was very persnickety, and she was very exact, and so that was her upbringing, and that was her story, and I and just in knowing your own story, it's so much easier to see other people's story, to realize where they've come from, to realize what they're undergoing, to realize the things that have been burdened upon them. And so, actually, the more you understand and have compassion for everyone's story, because we all have similar stories, there's very, very similar common denominators in many of us. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't loved. I wasn't cared for. I wasn't important. All of these common denominators show up in most people's story. And so, when you understand that about yourself, it's so incredible to be able to see another person, have compassion for them because they got their own story.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Well, this is really great stuff, Julian, JB. Where
So now they call me just beautiful sometimes. Les Brown, he actually Les Brown calls me. He calls me, "Hey, great one." He's like, it's nothing to do with JB, but he has he every time he calls me, he does make a little joke about JB. I've had it all. I've had it just beautiful. I've had jubilant bride. I've had jelly bean. I get it all. So it's quite fun.
that is hysterical. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
Well, of course, you can go to igniteyou.life. It's our website. You can find us there. Go to Amazon and just find any one of our Ignite books. We have 19 of them now. You can read out one of our Ignite stories, and then you can easily find access to us through any one of our books. But I, JB Owen, am always available. I love it when people reach out to me on Facebook and Instagram. I'm the only JB Owen on on the platform, so I'm easy to find. And I love, love, love his listening to people's other Ignite moments. Our current book is Ignite Your Wisdom. So we're all talking about wisdom. And our next book is Ignite Forgiveness. So we all know that many people have had Ignite moments around forgiving people. And so we're also doing Ignite Humanity and Ignite Legacy. So really have some big things going on in the future.
Well, JB, thank you so much for being here. I mean, you really have uplifted my afternoon. I love the energy.
Thank you so much for having me and blessings to each and every one of your listeners. I hope their life is filled with Ignite moments.
Ah, you and I both. And I'd like to thank you for listening to this edition of The Business of Story. If you like what you heard, please feel free to share it with your friends, family, colleagues, communities, and get after that ignite moment. Start thinking about when it is, where it is, what it meant to you. You know, I did a whole TEDx talk at TEDx Gilbert about 5 years ago to the 20-somethings in the crowd. And I said, stop looking for your story and start finding your scenes. Knit together your scenes and your story will find you. And I got a feeling that that's kind of what JB's talking about. The scenes are those ignite moments. And storytelling really is all about a moment in time when everything changed. It impacted who you are, or impacted people around you, and it shifted something. The universe changed, and there was something new about you and where you were headed. So go and find those ignite moments. Find the feeling inside there. It's not always easy to do, and it takes an awful lot of courage to be able to share those feelings with others, especially strangers. But as JB said, when you do, your whole world will change, because you might even be kind of rocking their world in the process too. So this sort of storytelling around igniting change is great in sales. It's great in marketing. It certainly is all about your brand, both your personal brand, your professional brand, your organizational brand. And I can't underscore enough the importance of finding the moments in your life that has informed who you are today. So just an absolute pleasure interviewing JB today on this show, and go and check out their work. Some really amazing stuff. If I can help you, come on over to The Business of Story, where I've got, as you know, all kinds of tools, tips, techniques, and talent there, just like JB, to help you craft and tell compelling stories that sell. And if you have not yet taken either the short online course, The ABTs of Selling, or the ABTs of Branding, head over to businessofstory.thinkific.com right now. Both programs are only $35. They take less than 30 minutes to do, and it will revolutionize how you communicate using the and, but, therefore, that ABT foundational narrative framework that you've heard me talk so much about right here. Come on back next Monday when we'll have another amazing story artist right here for you like JB. And until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks so much for listening.